489 classified documents vanished. 550 sudden arrests, 89 erased emails. And exactly 31 seconds that detonated Congress like a ticking bomb. In a live showdown broadcast across America, Jasmine Crockett rose like fire, ripping into Kash Patel, the FBI director accused of guarding Trump's secrets instead of the nation's truth. Every word was a dagger, every silence a scream, every revelation a shockwave. And in that fateful half-minute, millions witnessed democracy pushed to the edge. The question is, when justice burns this bright, who dares to survive the flames? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The silence before the hearing felt heavier than any nose Jasmine Crockett had ever endured. She sat alone, hands gripping a folder of evidence so explosive it could shatter careers, topple reputations, maybe even destabilize the FBI itself. Inside those files were numbers that screamed betrayal. 489 classified documents vanished, 550 arrests paraded as trophies, 89 emails erased in the shadows. Numbers don't lie, but men like Kash Patel did. Jasmine wasn't naive. She knew what she was walking into. A chamber packed with cameras, a gauntlet of hostile Republicans waiting to pounce, and Patel himself, smug, calculating, protected by the machinery of power. He was more than just a bureaucrat. He was Trump's loyal enforcer, a man who had turned the FBI into a shield for corruption and a weapon against truth. He believed he was untouchable, and that arrogance was the crack Jasmine intended to split. Wide open, her chest burned, not from fear, but from the weight of history pressing down on her. She remembered the young man in her district beaten in a police stop that never should have happened, the immigrant mother deported after a clerical trick, the families who looked at her and begged for someone, anyone, to speak when everyone else stayed silent. Those voices were with her now, echoing inside her like a battle cry. She was not just a congresswoman. Tonight, she was their blade. Across town, Patel was already rehearsing his smirk. He would dismiss her as loud, as reckless, as political theater. He would lean back in his chair, oozing confidence, convinced the institution he commanded could bury any truth she dared to speak. He thought silence and intimidation were enough. But he hadn't faced Jasmine Crockett before. She rose from her chair, smoothing her blazer, her eyes locked on the door ahead. The weight of 330 million Americans pressed invisibly against her shoulders, but instead of bending, she felt sharper, steadier. She'd whisper under her breath, "This isn't about me. This is about exposing him." The hallway outside thundered, with footsteps, cameras, voices chanting her name and cursing it in the same breath. It didn't matter. All that mattered was the moment, a moment broadcast to millions, when she would stand before Patel, armed with nothing but words and truth, and demand answers he could not give. Jasmine could already see his face when she asked the question that would ricochet through the nation like a gunshot. "Mr. Patel, are you the director of the FBI? Or just Trump's guard dog?" She gripped the folder tighter, her pulse a steady drumbeat of defiance. There would be shouting, there would be fury, there would be consequences, but there would also be truth, raw and undeniable, ripping through the chamber like thunder. The storm wasn't coming, the storm was her, and America was about to decide. Could one woman's fire burn through an empire built on silence? By dawn, Washington was already ablaze with no's. Outside the Capitol, satellite trucks lined the streets. Anchors rehearsed their gravest tones, and every network spun its version of the story before the first gavel struck. CNN's banner blared the reckoning. FBI director faces Congress. Fox countered with Crockett's witch hunt. Democrats weaponize oversight. MSNBC flashed "Can justice survive politics?" The hearing hadn't even begun, and the battlefield was already drenched in narrative blood. On social media, the war was fiercer. The hashtags cut across screens like battle lines. Hashtag Team Patel surged among Trump loyalists, their avatars drenched in flags and fury, while hashtag Justice with Jasmine thundered back, carried by voices demanding accountability. Memes exploded, edits of Jasmine holding files like blades, Patel caricature as Trump's chained guard dog. The comments weren't arguments anymore, they were open fire. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, the entire digital sphere had turned into an arena, and the nation was already choosing sides. For Jasmine, the spectacle wasn't abstract. It was a weight pressing against her ribs as she paced the hallway outside the chamber, her phone buzzing with messages, son cheering, some vile enough to chill her blood. Death threats had become routine. She had learned to delete them without hesitation, but on this morning, one message lingered. If you speak, you'll pay. Silence keeps you safe. She locked the screen, her jaw tight. Silence had never saved anyone she knew. She thought of the teenage beau in her district who called her office after being stopped by police for the third time in a single month. She thought of the Latina mother sobbing as immigration officers dragged her husband away, leaving two children, clutching her legs. She thought of the elderly man who told her, voice trembling, I fought for this country, but it stopped fighting for me. These weren't stories to her, they were scars. And tonight, in front of millions, she would peel them open as proof that silence had cost America too much already. But she was human, and doubt crawled in like smoke before fire. What if Patel turned the hearing into a circus? What if Republicans drowned her in jeers and interruptions? What if her fury was twisted into the very weapon they used against her? She wasn't just fighting Patel. She was fighting the perception of a woman branded too loud, too angry, too uncompromising. She could already see the headlines waiting to crucify her. Unhinged Crockett meltdown. She closed her eyes, drew in a breath that trembled, then steadied. Fear was real, but fear was not fatal. Not if courage held the mic longer than doubt. And courage, for Jasmine Crockett, was no performance. It was her marrow, her inheritance from generations silenced and forgotten. As the doors to the chamber creaked open, the lights of the world poured in. Jasmine squared her shoulders. Clutching the folder of vanished files, she was walking into a lion's den, and she knew it. The question was no longer whether Patel would fight back, it was whether the nation would see through the smoke and recognize the truth when it burned in front of them. Because tonight, America would decide. Would Jasmine's courage rise high enough to pierce the machine, or would it crush her, leaving her the most polarizing figure in the country? The chamber was already overflowing when the doors opened. Every seat crammed, cameras flashing like lightning, reporters jostling for space, the air thick with a hunger that felt closer to a boxing match than a congressional hearing. Outside, chants from protesters rattled through the marble walls, one side shouting justice for Trump, the other roaring accountability now. The Capitol had become an arena, and the nation waited for blood. Kash Patel entered first, flanked by aides and smirking as if he owned the room. His tailored suit gleamed under the lights, his stride calculated to project dominance. He stopped deliberately before the cameras, adjusted his tie, and gave a small nod. The silent signal of a man convinced he was untouchable. His allies in the chamber leaned back with smug relief, certain their man would turn the hearing into a showcase of strength. Then Jasmine Crockett walked in. No entourage, no theatrics, just a steady pace, shoulders squared, eyes burning with fire that cut sharper than the camera's glare. The crowd hushed for a moment, as if instinctively sensing the collision about to erupt. She placed her folder of files on the desk with a resounding thud that carried across the chamber, a sound that was not just paper meeting wood but a warning bell. Patel smirked. Jasmine didn't flinch. The chair called the session to order, but the tension was already a living thing. Patel leaned back, offering a rehearsed smile, while Jasmine leaned forward, fingers interlaced, as if ready to strike. The first words were routine, statements, protocol, but beneath the surface, knives were being unsheathed. Patel's voice dripped with condescension. I look forward to clearing the record of these reckless insinuations. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, her reply measured yet cutting. Truth does not need clearing, Director. Only lies do. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The tone was set. Confidence clashed with defiance, arrogance with conviction. The cameras capture every flicker, Patel's forced calm, Jasmine's steady fire. And already, on screens across America, viewers leaned closer, waiting for the explosion they knew was coming. Behind the desk, Jasmine leaned toward her aide, her voice low but unshakable. This is not just about Patel, it's about America's soul. The aide swallowed hard, nodding. Jasmine straightened, her gaze locking onto Patel with the intensity of a duel. He looked back, smirk curling again, but something flickered in his eyes. The first crack, the recognition that this woman was not walking into his game, she was bringing her own. The chair announced that evidence would soon be presented. The words fell like a drumroll. Cameras zoomed in, staffers shuffled papers. Patel folded his arms with feigned ease. Jasmine's hand rested on the folder, her pulse steady, her silence louder than any shout. The audience could feel it. The room was seconds from detonation. And across a nation glued to their screens, one question sharpened in every mind, pulsing like a countdown to impact. What revelations buried in those documents could be powerful enough to shake not just Patel, but the very foundations of America itself? The chair gavelled the session to order, but the room was already thrumming like a live wire. Patel leaned back in his chair, exuding a smug ease, hands folded as if the entire proceeding were beneath him. Jasmine sat forward, eyes locked, her folder resting on the desk like a weapon waiting to be unsheathed. Patel spoke first, his tone smooth, rehearsed, dripping with self-satisfaction. In just 6 months, the FBI has taken bold action to restore safety to our nation's capital. Over 550 violent offenders removed from the streets, guns seized, drugs confiscated, and families finally sleeping safer at night. That is my record. That is the truth. He paused, lips curling in a smile meant for the cameras. His allies nodded, the sound of scattered applause echoing through the chamber. Jasmine didn't flinch. She let the moment hang, let Patel bask in his performance, then leaned into the microphone. Her voice cut through the chamber like a blade. 550 arrests, that is your headline. But here is your reality. Under your watch, 489 classified files vanished into thin air. She slammed her palm against the folder, the crack reverberating through the room. Vanished, director, gone, erased from the eyes of the American people. The chamber gasped. Patel shifted in his seat, the smirk faltering for the first time. Cameras zoomed in, catching every twitch of his jaw. He scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. This is grandstanding, pure theatrics from a loudmouth politician desperate for headlines. Congresswoman Crockett, you confuse nose with leadership. Jasmine's lips curled into the faintest smile, but her eyes blazed. Nose, no, director. Nose is what you create when you pound your chest about arrests while burying the truth. Facts are not nose, numbers are not nose. 489 missing files, that is not nose. That is a crime. The room crackled with tension, reporters furiously scribbled, camera shutters fired like gunshots. Patel leaned forward now, voice sharpened with irritation. The Congresswoman is misleading this chamber. Files are misplaced, misclassified, transferred. Bureaucracy is not conspiracy. Jasmine pounced, not giving him air to recover. Misplaced. 89 emails deleted in the days before Mar-a-Lago. Deleted, director, was that bureaucracy too? Or was that obedience to a man you serve like a master? Patel's face hardened, his jaw locking tight. Behind him, Republican allies erupted, shouting out of order. And she's lying. The chair banged the gavel, but order was already slipping, the atmosphere turning electric with rage and anticipation. Jasmine sat steady amid the chaos, her voice low, deliberate, carrying across the room like thunder. Before a storm, you can insult me, director. You can drown me in no's, but you cannot erase numbers. And numbers have a way of carving through lies. The chamber fell into a tense silence, every eye on Patel, every camera fixed to capture his reaction. For the first time, the director seemed cornered, his calm mask cracking under the weight of facts that could no longer be dismissed. And across a nation glued to screens, one question cut sharper than any headline. Could Patel maintain control of this narrative, or had Jasmine just driven the first nail into the armor he believed was impenetrable? The silence after Jasmine's last words was razor-thin, the kind that makes a room ache. Patel leaned forward, hands folded, trying to project composure, but his jaw ticked as if the numbers she'd hurled at him had struck deeper than he expected. He opened his mouth, ready to unleash another dismissive retort. That was when Jasmine decided to detonate the chamber. She leaned closer to the microphone, her voice low but laced with fire, each word sharpened like a blade meant to cut through stone. Mr. Patel, are you the director of the FBI? She paused deliberately, letting the weight of expectation fill the air. Or just Trump's guard dog? The impact was instantaneous. The chamber gasped as if struck by lightning. Some staffers choked back laughter, others froze in horror. Republicans leapt from their seats, shouting, outrageous, and disrespect, while Democrats held their breath, eyes wide at the audacity of the strike. The press gallery exploded, pens scratching, phones lighting, live tweets firing into the bloodstream of the internet. Within seconds, Twitter's trending feed was a battlefield. Hashtag Kash Patel rocketed to the top, accompanied by memes of Patel on a leash, his face pasted onto snarling bulldogs chained to Trump's golden throne. Cable networks broke into live coverage. CNN's Chiron screened Crockett to Patel, Trump's guard dog, while Fox blasted Crockett's cheap shot stuns hearing. MSNBC's panel was already dissecting the phrase, like scripture. Patel's smirk cracked. His face flushed crimson, a vein pulsing at his temple. He forced a hollow laugh into the microphone. Congresswoman, this chamber deserves more than circus acts. You can bark all you want, but barking doesn't make you right. This is nothing but grandstanding, a desperate plow from a loudmouth politician who confuses insults with arguments. But the room had shifted. The insult had already pierced his armor, and no scoff could stitch it back together. Jasmine didn't blink, her eyes drilling into his, her voice steady, unrelenting. Grandstanding is what you've done with those arrests, parading numbers while burying the truth. I'm not here to bark, Director. I'm here to bite into the lies you've been feeding this nation. The chamber erupted again, the chair pounding the gavel, demanding order that no one was willing to give. Protesters outside caught wind of the moment, their chants rising into the marble. Guard dog, echoing through the halls. Like war drums, Patel shifted in his seat, suddenly aware that the insult wasn't just a jab. It was a brand seared into him, one the public would not forget. The cameras stayed fixed on Jasmine. She didn't shout, she didn't gloat, she sat perfectly still, her silence daring Patel to fill it. The louder he tried to dismiss her, the smaller he looked, and millions watching at home knew they had just witnessed a moment that would define the hearing, the question that now hung over Washington, reverberating through living rooms, newsrooms, and the echo chambers of social media, was not whether Jasmine had crossed a line, but something far more unsettling. Was this fearless insult political suicide, or the stroke of genius that would corner Patel and change the course of the fight forever? Patel gripped the microphone, his composure cracking but not yet gone. He straightened his shoulders, voice booming with forced authority, desperate to seize control of the room. In 6 months, under my leadership, the FBI captured Cindy Singh, a fugitive who murdered her own 6-year-old daughter and fled across borders. We broke a multi-state drug cartel, seizing over 40 pounds of fentanyl before it poisoned our streets. We dismantled 3 terrorism plots before they reached American soil. That is the record I stand on, not the circus accusations of this chamber. Applause erupted from his Republican allies. Jim Jordan banged his fist on the desk, roaring, "That's law and order. That's results." Patel leaned back, smirk returning, the arrogance creeping into his face once more. He thought the tide was shifting, but Jasmine leaned forward, her voice cutting through the noise like glass shattering. And yet, 489 classified files disappear while you were in charge. Files that held the truth Americans deserved, gone, vanished, buried. She tapped the folder with sharp precision, each strike echoing like a drumbeat. You brag about arrests, but the very heart of our democracy, transparency, accountability, is rotting under your watch. The room hissed with tension. Patel's smirk twitched. He countered quickly. Files are paperwork, bureaucracy. Do you want safety, or do you want red tape? I deliver safety. Jasmine's eyes blazed. Safety without truth is nothing but tyranny in disguise. Her words thundered over the chamber, and even Patel's supporters stiffened at the force of her conviction. She opened the folder. Pages fanned out like weapons, each marked with damning evidence. Whistleblowers inside your own bureau risked their lives to expose you. They testified to orders, your orders, to erase evidence and silence dissent. How many more files would have vanished if they hadn't come forward? Patel slammed his fist against the desk. Lies, traitors trying to undermine the very institution that protects you. His voice cracked with fury. Republicans erupted. Out of order. This is a disgrace. Shut her down. The chair pounded the gavel, his calls for order drowned. Beneath the roar, the chamber had devolved into chaos, voices colliding like thunderclaps, but Jasmine rose above it. She didn't yell to compete, she roared to dominate. Her voice, raw and unyielding, thundered through the nose, "Protect me. Protect America." Director Patel, the only thing you protected is Trump's grip on power. You let killers walk free in the shadows of bureaucracy, all parading petty arrests as victory. You betrayed your oath, your badge, and the trust of every American watching this hearing. Patel's face was crimson, his hand trembling as he tried to steady his tapers. Cameras zoomed in mercilessly, capturing every flicker of panic beneath his bluster. The room felt like a powder keg, every second pushing it closer to detonation. And across the nation, millions watching could feel it too. This wasn't just politics. This was war inside the very heart of American democracy. The question, hanging heavy and terrifying, was no longer about files or numbers. It was about power itself. How far would Kash Patel go to silence Jasmine Crockett's voice before the truth burned him alive? Patel leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the desk, voice rising not with reason, but with rage sharpened into performance. This chamber is watching the most reckless display I have ever seen. Congresswoman Crockett isn't fighting for justice, she is undermining every man and woman in uniform who risks their life to keep this nation safe. Every time she opens her mouth, she makes their job harder. She spits on their sacrifice. Republicans roared in agreement, pounding desks, chanting shame, shame, as if the hearing had morphed into a trial against Jasmine herself. Patel seized the momentum, his voice booming like a preacher before a riled congregation. Crime in Washington has dropped by 14% since I took office. Gun seizures up 27%. Homicides cut in half compared to this time last year. These are facts, numbers that prove my leadership works. And yet here sits Congresswoman Crockett, tearing down the FBI. Not because she cares about safety, but because she wants a headline. The gallery stirred, some nodding, others shaking their heads, the clash spilling beyond party lines. Patel smirked again, sensing the moment shift back toward him. He jabbed his finger toward Jasmine, his tone dripping venom. She doesn't want safety. She wants chaos. She thrives in division. She would rather see blood on our streets than admit that the FBI under my command has delivered results. That is not courage, that is sabotage. The words cut like daggers. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned into her microphone, voice steady, each syllable a bullet. Numbers don't erase corruption, Director. You can parade percentages until your tongue turns blue, but statistics are not shields for betrayal. You talk about homicides, about seizures, but where in your numbers do you account for the 489 classified files that vanished under your nose? Where in your numbers do you account for the whistleblowers who risked everything to expose your cover-ups? Crime may be down on paper, but corruption is rotting the walls of your bureau. And the rot begins with you. Gasps cut through the chamber, reporters nearly leaping from their chairs as if Jasmine had physically struck Patel across the face. Patel froze, his eyes narrowing, but the crimson flush of his cheeks betrayed the wound. He tried to fire back, voice trembling with fury. This is slander. She is weaponizing lies to attack the very agency that protects her freedom to speak them. His words came out strained, desperate, the confidence bleeding from his performance. Jasmine slammed her hand against the desk, her voice erupting like thunder. No, Director. Lies are what vanish in the night. Lies are what get deleted from inboxes. Lies are what shatter trust in the very institution you swore to defend. I'm not undermining law enforcement. I'm defending it from the cancer sitting right in front of me. The chamber convulsed with shouts, the chair's gavel cracking over the chaos. But beneath the fury, the line was drawn. Patel's fortress of numbers against Jasmine's blade of truth. And as millions watched the clash unfold live, the question grew louder with every heartbeat. Would America side with Patel's manufactured strength, or would Jasmine's unrelenting truth corner him before the nation's eyes? The chamber was still echoing from Jasmine's last strike when she reached for the folder again. Her hands were steady, but her voice sharpened to a lethal edge. Director Patel, you speak of safety, of law, of order. But safety does not vanish in the night. Law does not delete itself, order does not erase history. Yet, under your command, 89 emails disappeared, gone, wiped from your bureau's servers in the hours leading up to the Mar-a-Lago raid. She snapped her fingers, and instantly, staffers moved. Screens around the chamber flickered to life, glowing with the words 89 deleted emails in bold red letters, followed by date stamps and subject lines. The effect was nuclear. Reporters gasped, cameras zoomed, pens flew across notepads as the gallery erupted in a frenzy. Patel stiffened, his face draining color before flooding with red. He tried to lean back, to mask the panic with arrogance, but his eyes betrayed him, darting from the screens to the cameras to Jasmine, like a man cornered with nowhere to run. Technical glitch, he muttered quickly, his tone too sharp. To rehearsed, servers fail. Data is lost all the time. It is nothing unusual, Jasmine pounced, voice rising over his excuse, each word like a gavel strike. Nothing unusual. 89 emails tied directly to the Mar-a-Lago operation. Vanish overnight. And you call that nothing unusual? Those emails were not random. They bore subject lines, authorization, classified index, follow-up directive, emails that could have revealed who gave the orders and why. Gasps rippled again, some journalists standing to catch a better view, others whispering furiously into phones. Patel shifted uncomfortably, sweat gleaming under the lights, his hand tightening around the microphone until his knuckles whitened. This is misleading speculation, Patel barked, his voice cracking. No court has ruled, no investigator has found wrongdoing. These claims are political theater, not evidence, but Jasmine didn't blink. She stood, holding up one of the documents, her voice ringing like steel against stone. This is not theater, director. This is betrayal. Whistleblowers inside your bureau risked their careers to ensure these deletions were not buried. They gave me timestamps, screenshots, internal memos. These are not glitches, these are fingerprints of corruption, stamped with your leadership. The room detonated. Republicans screamed out of order. Democrats leaned forward, eyes blazing, the chair's gavel pounding uselessly as the chamber convulsed in chaos. Protesters outside caught the news within seconds. Chants of 89, 89 began to echo through the marble halls. Like war drums. Patel raised his voice, desperate, spittle at the corners of his mouth. This is slander. You are endangering national security. Jasmine slammed the folder shut, the sound a cannon blast in the stunned chamber. Her eyes locked onto his, her voice low but deadly clear. If those emails were innocent, director, why erase them at all? The silence that followed was suffocating, every camera locked on Patel's trembling jaw. And across America, millions of viewers felt the same chill crawl down their spine, haunted by the question that could not be ignored. Had the director of the FBI been caught red-handed destroying the very truth he was sworn to protect? Patel's face was red, his composure shredded, but his instinct for survival had not failed him. He leaned forward, gripping the microphone with both hands, and spat his counterattack like venom. Congresswoman Crockett loves to talk about integrity, but perhaps the American people should be reminded of her own record. The chamber fell silent for a beat, anticipation coiling like a snake. Patel smirked, sensing the opening. This is the same Jasmine Crockett who once accepted donations from groups under investigation for tax fraud. The same Jasmine who was accused of misleading voters in her campaign literature. The same Jasmine who has been called unhinged, unstable, and unfit to serve. She wants to lecture me about corruption. Look in the mirror, Congresswoman. Gasps tore through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras panned to Jasmine, hunting for cracks in her armor. Patel's allies grinned, their voices rising in chorus. Shame, shame. As if they could drown her in the nose of her own supposed past. Patel pressed harder, his words growing sharper, more desperate. She's not here for justice, she's here for spectacle. She thrives on chaos because chaos makes her relevant. This is not oversight, it's opportunism. This isn't courage. It's self-promotion. He leaned back, smug satisfaction creeping back into his expression, convinced he had landed the blow that would stain her credibility before the nation. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't stammer or blink. She locked her eyes on Patel, with a calm that was more devastating than any outburst, and when she spoke, her voice carried the kind of clarity that slices through every layer of nose. When they go low, I go for the truth. The words hung heavy, the chamber falling into a tense hush. She stood slowly, her presence filling the room, her voice turning not to Patel but to the millions watching live across America. I have made mistakes, I have stumbled, just like every person sitting in their living room watching this tonight. But here is the difference. My mistakes have never stolen justice from a single American family. My mistakes have never erased 89 emails. My mistakes have never buried 489 classified files. My mistakes have never turned the FBI into a weapon for one man's power. Her voice cracked slightly, not with weakness, but with conviction. as she recounted the stories of her constituents. "I stand here for the mother who lost her son to a system that never gave him a chance. I stand here for the veteran who came home to find his government had abandoned him. I stand here for the child who looks at this flag and wonders if it will ever truly protect them. That is why I fight. Not for headlines, not for theater, for them." The chamber trembled in silence. Patel's smirk evaporated, replaced by a flicker of something he couldn't disguise: fear. And across America, living rooms grew quiet, eyes locked on the screen, the smear attempt dissolving under the weight of something more powerful than numbers or insults: raw truth. But as the hearing pressed deeper into chaos, one question thundered, louder than the applause or the jeers: could even the ugliest personal attacks derail a fighter who refused to bow? Or would Jasmine's unbreakable defiance only expose Patel's desperation to silence her? The chamber snapped. 1 second Jasmine's words rang clear. The next they were drowned beneath a tidal wave of outrage. Republicans erupted from their seats, pointing, jabbing fingers, their voices colliding into one deafening roar: "Out of order! Sit down! You're a disgrace!" The chair's gavel hammered again and again, but it was no match for the storm. Jasmine leaned into her microphone, trying to continue, but the chorus only grew louder, a wall of sound designed to break her rhythm. Jim Jordan shouted, until his face turned crimson. Marjorie Taylor Greene stood, screaming across the chamber, her voice shrill: "Liar! Fraud! You hate this country!" Their allies pounded desks, a cacophony meant to suffocate her words before they reached the cameras. Through the chaos, Patel sat back in his chair, arms crossed, lips curled into a smug grin. He didn't need to join the shouting. His soldiers were doing the work for him. To the cameras, he looked composed, untouchable, a man amused by his opponent's unraveling. He thought Jasmine was losing control, but Jasmine refused to be erased. She gripped the microphone, her voice slicing through the pandemonium with the force of a hammer breaking glass. "You will not silence me." The room jolted. Her words thundered above the jeers, a declaration not just to the chamber but to every American watching live. The shouting didn't stop, but Jasmine's defiance cut through it like a blade. She rose from her seat, her eyes scanning the chamber, locking onto Patel, refusing to blink. "You can scream until your throats bleed. You can pound desks until the wood splinters. But the truth will not vanish because you're afraid to hear it." For a heartbeat, even the shouting stuttered. Reporters craned forward, pens frozen mid-sentence, cameras zooming to catch the fire in her eyes. The moment pulsed with raw tension, the clash no longer about politics, but about will. A contest of who would break first. Patel's smirk deepened, misreading her strength as recklessness. He whispered to an aide, chuckling, as if the chaos proved his point. But beneath the surface, cracks formed. For the first time, millions watching at home were seeing not just numbers, not just insults, but a woman standing against an entire machine screaming to drown her out. And the machine was beginning to look desperate. The chair slammed his gavel so hard the sound ricocheted off the marble walls. "Order! Order!" He yelled, his voice raw, but order was gone. The hearing had descended into open war, and at its center, Jasmine stood unflinching, her voice steady despite the storm. She leaned into the mic one last time, her voice low but piercing, each word meant to echo beyond the chamber. "Director Patel can hide behind your screams, but the truth does not need silence. It only needs courage." The chamber froze, the words landing like stone into water, rippling outward. Patel's smirk faltered for just a flicker, a twitch in his jaw betraying the unease he worked so hard to mask. And as millions watch, the question burned hotter than the chaos itself: had Kash Patel fatally underestimated Jasmine Crockett's resilience, mistaking defiance for weakness when it was her greatest weapon? The chamber was still vibrating from the shouting match when Jasmine slowly raised her hand for silence. Her voice dropped, not in weakness but in precision, like a scalpel cutting through chaos. "You screamed to drown me out. Fine, but will you scream over the voices of the people I represent? Will you scream over their pain?" The Republicans jeered, but the ferocity of her tone cut through the noise. The room leaned forward instinctively as Jasmine opened the folder again, this time not with numbers, but with stories. "A mother in my district. Her name was Rosa. She lived here for 20 years, paid taxes, raised two children who know no other country but this one. And yet, one night, men with badges, FBI agents, stormed into her home, dragged her away in front of her children. She begged for one last hug, but they shoved her down the steps like a criminal. Her kids still cry every night, wondering if they'll ever see their mother again. That is what weaponization looks like. The chamber grew tense. Even Patel shifted, his smirk fading as the details sank in. Jasmine pressed on, her voice raw. A black teenager, 16 years old, straight-A student, captain of his debate team. Stopped by FBI task force agents 3 times in 1 month because he fit a description. 3rd time, they slammed him to the ground, handcuffed him on the sidewalk in front of his school. His only crime, his skin. She slammed the folder, shot, the sound ricocheting like a gunshot. That boy still has scars on his wrists. Scars your agents put there. Director, the gallery gasped, reporters 10 slowed. Even the chair, gavel frozen midair, seemed caught in the gravity of her words. Jasmine's voice broke slightly, but she steadied it, her gaze drilling straight into the cameras broadcasting to millions. These are not statistics, these are not partisan talking points. These are families destroyed, children traumatized, lives shattered because the FBI has been twisted into a weapon. And when you stand there bragging about arrests and percentages, director, you spit on their pain. You erase their humanity. Patel leaned back, shifting uncomfortably, his confidence rattled. The smirk he had worn like armor cracked into something less certain, his eyes darting toward the cameras as if realizing the optics were slipping from his grip. Jasmine pointed her finger, steady and relentless. You can dismiss me, you can insult me, you can unleash your allies to scream until this chamber shakes. But you cannot erase Rosa, you cannot erase that boy, and you cannot erase the truth that this system, your system, is failing the very people it swore to protect. Silence blanketed the room. For the first time all day, there were no shouts, no interruptions, only the hum of cameras capturing the moment, and the heavy weight of truth pressing down on everyone present. And as millions of Americans sat in their living rooms, hearts pounding, the question hung in the air like a verdict not yet delivered. Could real human pain break through the nose of politics and force the nation to finally listen? The chamber was still hushed from Jasmine's searing stories when Patel lunged forward, desperate to reclaim the narrative. His voice was loud, too loud, the pitch betraying the cracks in his composure. Enough of this theater. Enough of these sob stories. Leadership isn't about emotions, it's about order. It's about keeping this country standing when everything threatens to tear it apart. He slammed his hand on the desk, the sound hollow, more panic than power. Reporters' pens hovered. The gallery leaned in. The silence waiting for his next words became a trap he didn't see coming. And then he said it. Words that would brand him forever. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for stability. The chamber gasped in unison. Even his allies stiffened, the words dropping like lead in a room already drowning in tension. Patel froze for half a second, realizing too late what he had admitted. But Jasmine was faster. She shot to her feet, her voice erupting with the force of a thunderclap. Sacrifices? What sacrifices, director? The sacrifice of Rosa torn from her children. The sacrifice of a boy shackled on the pavement because of the color of his skin. Or do you mean the sacrifice of truth itself? She leaned forward, eyes locked on him like a predator on prey. You mean silencing the truth is stability? The room detonated. Reporters scrambled for their phones, tweets flying into the digital bloodstream. Within seconds, #Patel slip was trending worldwide. Clips of his words replay endlessly. Sacrifices must be made for stability, spliced against Jasmine's furious retort. On cable news tickers, breaking banners lit up like fireworks. Patel slip rocks FBI hearing. Patel stammer, fumbling for recovery. That's not what I meant. My words are being twisted. But the panic was visible now, his hands twitching, his eyes darting desperately around the chamber as if searching for escape. Jasmine didn't give him a second. Her voice dropped lower, each word sharper than a knife. You didn't slit, director, you confessed. For you, justice is expendable. Truth is expendable. People are expendable. And you call that stability. The chamber went still, her words echoing into the silence. Even the chair, gavel raised midair, seemed frozen. For the first time, Patel's armor of arrogance was gone, replaced by something raw and undeniable. Fear. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the sweat rolling down his temple, the tremor in his clenched jaw. Patel's allies shouted desperately. to drown her out, but their voices were already fading beneath the roar of social media exploding outside the chamber walls. Across the nation, Americans replayed the clip, some in shock, others in rage, but all struck by the unmistakable revelation. The mask had slipped. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, eyes never leaving Patel, her silence now more damning than any words. She had landed the blow, and she knew it. And as millions watched the clip go viral in real time, one chilling question began to spread faster than the hashtag itself. Had Patel just revealed the dark truth buried beneath all his rhetoric? That power, not justice, was the only stability he ever cared about. The chamber still buzzed from Patel's slip when Jasmine straightened, her voice cutting through the tension with surgical precision. Director Patel says sacrifices are necessary. Very well. Let's see what he was willing to sacrifice. She raised her hand, signaling toward the back of the room. The doors opened. A figure stepped forward, escorted by congressional staff. The atmosphere snapped taut, like a wire ready to break. Gasps rippled as the man approached the witness table. He wore a plain suit, his eyes shadowed with fatigue, but the tremor in his hands betrayed the enormity of his choice. Jasmine's words rang out. This is Special Agent Daniel Reeves. 17 years in the FBI. Commendations for counterterrorism. And tonight, a whistleblower. The gallery erupted. Reporters leapt to their feet, camera shutters firing. Like gunfire, Republicans shouted objections, pounding their desks. This is irregular. This is a stunt. Patel sat frozen, eyes narrowing into slits, his smirk gone. Reeves adjusted the microphone, his voice low but steady. Under oath, I testified that Director Patel personally authorized the deletion of 37 classified files. These deletions were not technical errors, they were deliberate. They involved materials connected to the Mar-a-Lago operation, ongoing intelligence briefings, and internal correspondence about political directives. The chamber detonated. 37. Someone gasped aloud. Reporters scrambled, typing furiously. Live streams exploding with updates. Whistleblower accuses Patel of deleting files. Twitter ignited instantly. Hashtags number 37 deletions and hashtag Patel exposed climbing with blistering speed. Patel's face twisted, fury and fear battling in his expression. He slammed the desk, his voice shaking. This is a liar, a traitor to the Bureau. I will not sit here and be slandered by a disgraced agent. But Jasmine leaned forward, her voice slicing clean through his outburst. Disgraced, or dangerous to your grip on power. Agent Reeves didn't come here empty-handed, Director. He came with documents, your signature, your authorization. 37 times, screens lit up around the chamber again, projecting scanned memos. Patel's initials scrawled in the corner of each deletion order. Gasps cascaded like falling dominoes. Even Patel's allies faltered, glancing uneasily at one another, their confidence cracking under the weight of undeniable ink. Patel's voice cracked. These documents are fabricated. But he couldn't finish. The silence after the images spoke louder than anything he could say. Jasmine's tone dropped, cold and deliberate. You called me reckless, Director. You called me loud, but what do you call this? 37 deletions, 37 betrayals, 37 times you chose power over justice. The chamber had gone from chaos to deathly stillness, every heartbeat audible, every eye locked on Patel. He sat there trembling, his empire of arrogance collapsing under the weight of truth laid bare by one of his own. And as millions of Americans watched the whistleblower's testimony unfold, one chilling question echoed across the nation. Could Kash Patel possibly survive damning evidence unleashed from within the very bureau he was sworn to lead? Patel lurched forward, his voice cracking like a whip, trembling with fury. Lies, every word of this testimony is a fabrication. Agent Reeves is no whistleblower, he is a traitor. A disgruntled employee trying to burn down the bureau he swore to serve. This is treason, plain and simple. His fist slammed the table, echoing through the chamber, desperation hiding behind the mask of authority. The room convulsed with chaos. Republicans rose from their seats, shouting in unison, traitor, fraud, liar. Their voices ricocheted against the marble walls, turning the hearing into a maelstrom of sound. Cameras zoomed in on Patel, his face flushed, eyes wild, the image of a man cornered but clawing. Jasmine's chair scraped as she stood, her presence commanding the room. She raised her hand toward Reeves, her voice booming like thunder. This man is not a traitor. He is a patriot, the kind of patriot who risks everything to tell the truth. When the powerful would bury it, the Republicans roared back, pounding desks. But Jasmine didn't yield. Her voice rose higher, burning through the nose. You dare call him treasonous, Director? The only treason here is shredding the Constitution you swore to uphold. The only betrayal is yours. Patel leaned forward, veins bulging in his neck. You are destroying the credibility of the FBI with this circus, Congresswoman. You are handing our enemies the tools to weaken this nation. Jasmine's eyes blazed, her fingers stabbing the air toward him. No, Director. You weakened this nation the moment you chose loyalty to a man over loyalty to the law. You betrayed the badge you wear. The chamber erupted, gasps, shouts, reporters nearly falling over one another to capture the moment. The chair's gavel thundered uselessly, his pleas for order drowned beneath the storm. Protesters outside had already seized on the line. Chants of betrayed the badge, betrayed the badge. Pulsed through the walls like war drums. Reed sat stone still, his eyes fixed on Patel, no longer trembling, his voice, quiet but resolute, cut through the uproar. I didn't betray the FBI. I defended it. From you. The words struck Patel harder than any accusation. His smirk evaporated. He fumbled with his notes, papers scattering, his control slipping further with every second. Jasmine seized the silence, her voice now steady, low, each word a hammer. You can scream traitor until your lungs collapse, Director. That the documents have your signature, the truth has your name. And no amount of rage will erase either. The chamber froze, the air thick with dread and revelation. Patel sat trembling, surrounded yet utterly alone, his empire of defiance crumbling in real time. And across America, millions watching asked themselves the question now burning brighter than the gavel's echo: would the public believe Patel's desperate denial, or the whistleblower's damning truth defended by Jasmine's unyielding fire? The chamber was still vibrating from Jasmine's thunder when she leaned forward, her voice low but sharpened to a dagger's edge. She didn't shout, she didn't need to. Her words carried the weight of the entire hearing. Director Patel, look America in the eye and deny you politicized the FBI. The challenge slammed into the room like a lightning strike. Reporters froze mid-sentence, cameras zoomed so tight they caught the twitch of Patel's eyelid, the bead of sweat crawling down his temple. The audience leaned forward, breaths held, as though the entire country had been sucked into this single moment. Patel opened his mouth, then stopped. His jaw clenched, his eyes flickered from Jasmine to the cameras, then to the papers scattered before him. 10 seconds passed, the silence pressed down like a suffocating weight. The chamber had never been so loud in its quiet. At 20 seconds, the air turned electric. Protesters outside had stopped chanting, straining to hear what would come next. Twitter exploded in real time. Hashtag Patel freeze. Hashtag 31 seconds shooting to the top of the feed. News anchors whispered live on air, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Jasmine never looked away. She held his gaze like steel locking onto its target, her presence filling the void he could not conquer. 25 seconds, his lips parted, his throat worked, but no sound emerged. His fingers tapped nervously against the desk, his composure evaporating with each agonizing tick of the clock. At 31 seconds, the silence became a roar. 31 seconds of nothing. No denial, no defense, no words to shield him. The nation had seen it. The most powerful law enforcement officer in America stripped bare, paralyzed by a truth too heavy to bury. The chair cleared his throat nervously, but Jasmine cut in first, her voice slicing the silence in half. You can't say it, Director, because you know it's true. Her words detonated, the chamber erupting in gasps, cameras flashing like a storm. Patel's face was ashen, his hands trembling, his empire of arrogance reduced to a man cornered by his own failure to speak. And across living rooms, offices, and crowded bars, Americans sat stunned, watching those 31 seconds replay again and again, realizing they had just witnessed something more damning than any insult or statistic, because sometimes silence screams louder than words, and the question now haunting the nation was brutal in its simplicity. What does 31 seconds of silence reveal more than a lifetime of rhetoric ever could? The hearing had barely adjourned when the media war exploded. CNN's banner blared across screens nationwide. Patel exposed, 31 seconds of silence, clips of him frozen, sweat glistening under the chamber lights, looped in a relentless cycle. each replay punctuated by commentators shaking their heads in disbelief. On MSNBC, analysts leaned in with urgency. This wasn't hesitation. This was paralysis. He couldn't deny it because the truth was too heavy to carry. But Fox News struck back instantly, flipping the script. Der Chiron screamed in bold rate, Crockett's witch hunt. Hosts railed that Jasmine had ambushed a sitting FBI director with theatrics, branding her a radical bent on dismantling law enforcement. Clips of Patel's defenders shouting out of order or replay as proof of a partisan circus. On panel shows, conservative pundits declared the real scandal wasn't Patel's silence. It was Crockett's audacity. Yet outside the partisan bubble, social media was already ablaze, feeding on the raw electricity of the moment. TikTok lit up with edits of Patel's 31 seconds, set to dramatic countdown clocks, heartbeats, even funeral bells. Memes flooded Twitter. Patel frozen like a statue. Patel with duct tape over his mouth. Patel on mute with the caption system error. The hashtag Patel slip sore, but it was Jasmine's own words that ignited like wildfire. Are you the director of the FBI, or just Trump's guard dog? Plastered itself across timelines, morphing into t-shirts, protest signs, even ringtone. Remixes overnight. On Instagram Reels, young activists lip-sync Jasmine's fiery retorts, each video framed with captions. This is courage. College students on campuses painted murals quoting her. Outside the Capitol, protesters held up cardboard cutouts of a leashed bulldog with Patel's face taped on. For Jasmine's supporters, she had transformed from congresswoman into icon, a voice daring to pierce the machinery of silence, but the backlash was just as fierce. Conservative influencers pumped out slick videos branding Jasmine unhinged, accusing her of destroying America's respect for law enforcement. Hashtags, #CrockettChows and #RadicalJasmine climbed the charts. Families watching at home found themselves divided at dinner tables. Was she a hero, or had she crossed a line no lawmaker should? Cable news only stoked the fire. Split screens filled households. Patel sitting frozen in silence on one side. Jasmine, standing tall with her piercing gaze on the other. Anchors asked again and again. Was this the end of Patel's credibility, or the beginning of Crockett's downfall? In living rooms, bars, and buses, Americans argued. Voices sharp, passions raw. One side saw Patel's silence as proof of guilt. The other saw it as proof he was under siege by a reckless partisan attack. But no one could look away, and as the storm raged across screens and feeds, the country found itself staring at the same haunting dilemma. How will public opinion, fractured, furious, and on fire, shape the fallout of a battle that had already shattered the nation's trust in its own guardians? The media firestorm spilled into the streets, and America's voices rose in raw chorus. In a diner in Ohio, a Vietnam veteran stared at the replay of Patel's 31 seconds on the muted television above the counter. His fists clenched, his voice gravel thick. I fought for this country. Silence like that, that's not leadership, that's surrender. Across the nation in Houston, a single mother sat on her couch with her two children asleep beside her. She'd whispered to the reporter's microphone, eyes glistening. When Jasmine said you betrayed the badge, I felt that, because I've seen men with badges treat us like we don't matter. For the first time, someone in power is saying it out loud. On a college campus in Michigan, students gathered around a laptop, their chants echoing through the dorm hallways. Guard dog, guard dog. A young woman wearing a Jasmine t-shirt spoke into the camera, breathless with conviction. We've grown up watching politicians fold. But Jasmine didn't fold, she fought back. That's why she matters. Reactions fractured along the fault lines of the nation. Some saw Jasmine as a reckless agitator, dragging institutions through the mud. Others saw her as a warrior, finally voicing the pain communities had carried in silence for decades. Minority neighborhoods in particular lit up with energy. Marches, murals, vigils in her honor. One immigrant father, holding his daughter on his shoulders, declared to the crowd, "She's fighting for us. And we will fight with her." Hope, fear, rage, pride. The country pulsed with emotions too big to contain. Every living room, every street corner alive with debate. And yet one question echoed above the noise, stretching from coast to coast. Could a single woman's woes, sharpened by truth and defiance, ignite a movement strong enough to shake the foundations of America itself? Patel did not retreat. Within hours of the hearing, he launched a full-scale defense tour, hopping from one conservative network to another. On Fox Prime Time, he sat beneath a banner reading "Targeted by the Radical Left." His voice softened, almost quivering, as he told viewers, "I've spent my life protecting this nation, and now I'm the victim of a smear campaign. Jasmine Crockett ambushed me with lies, staged theatrics, and disgraced Congress itself." Clips of his allies nodding solemnly filled the screen. Commentators railed against Jasmine, branding her dangerous, unstable, and a threat to America's respect for law enforcement. Patel leaned into the victimhood, painting himself as the last guardian of the FBI under siege by radicals. Millions of loyal viewers drank it in, the narrative spreading like wildfire in echo chambers already primed to defend him. But Jasmine was not silent. She hit the road, stepping onto church stages, gymnasium floors, and crowded town halls. With no teleprompter, no polished stagecraft, she looked her constituents in the eye and spoke with fire. "He wants you to believe he's the victim. That the real victims are Rosa, torn from her children. That 16-year-old boy cuffed on the sidewalk." Every American silenced by Patel's so-called stability. Crowds roared back, chanting her words, holding up homemade signs. "Truth over power and guard dog nitrogen monoxide more." Videos from her rallies flooded TikTok and Instagram, clips of her fiery speeches racking up millions of views in hours. America split further with every passing day. Families argued at dinner tables, churches divided into camps, college quads turned into debating arenas. Some hailed Patel as a patriot crucified by partisanship. Others lifted Jasmine as the voice of a movement long silenced. The tension was no longer confined to Washington. It was spilling into living rooms, workplaces, city streets. Two versions of America stared at each other, unblinking, each convinced the other was the enemy. And in that widening fracture, one question burned hotter than headlines, hashtags, or chants. Whose narrative would the nation ultimately believe? Patel's plea of persecution, or Jasmine's unrelenting call for justice? Anonymous whispers promising, "You're next." The FBI director had his army, and Jasmine Crockett, though she had millions watching, often felt like she stood alone. Colleagues avoided her in hallways, allies whispered that she had gone too far, and in the polished corridors of Washington, her name became synonymous with danger. To many, she wasn't a colleague anymore. She was a liability. She sat in her office one night long after the cameras had shut off, the city outside cloaked in restless silence. Her hands trembled as she read the latest threat, an email laced with venom. For a moment, she wondered if the cost of truth was to hide, if the isolation, the danger, the weight pressing on her chest was worth it. Then her aide knocked softly, placing a stack of envelopes on her desk. "From constituents," he said quietly. Jasmine opened the first. Inside, a child's handwriting scrawled in uneven letters. "You gave me hope. I want to be like you when I grow up." Her throat tightened. She opened another. This one from a teenage girl in Detroit. "They tell me I'm too loud, too angry. But then I saw you stand in that room, and I knew maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I'm brave." Jasmine pressed the letters to her chest, tears burning her eyes. The threats screamed louder, but these voices cut deeper, not with fear, but with faith. They reminded her that the fight wasn't for headlines, wasn't for clout. It was for them, the silenced, the scared, the next generation watching to see if truth could survive the fire. She looked into the mirror across her desk. Her reflection stared back, tired, battered, but unbroken. She whispered to herself, the words like a vow carved in stone, "If I fall, at least I fall fighting." And maybe that's enough to light their path. The next morning, as the sun cracked over Washington, Jasmine stood before cameras once again. No notes, no script, just her voice, carrying the weight of every letter, every scar, every dream placed in her hands. She knew the price of courage was steep. She also knew surrender would cost more. And across America, as millions watched her stand firm despite the storm, one question thundered louder than ever. Was the fight for justice worth the sacrifice of everything else, even her own life? The chamber was packed once more, but this time the tone was different. The circus of partisanship had given way to something heavier: inevitability. Patel sat stiff at the witness table, his shoulders hunched, the weight of weeks of revelations pressing him down. His once cocky smirk was gone, replaced by a hollow stare. What stunned the nation wasn't just Jasmine anymore. It was the sight of lawmakers from both sides closing in. A Republican from Texas leaned forward. "Director Patel, did you authorize the deletions?" A Democrat from California followed, sharply. "Why did you sit silent for 31 seconds when asked if you politicized the FBI?" Even Patel's usual allies didn't rise to defend him. His fortress was crumbling, brick by brick, under bipartisan fire. Jasmine waited, her silence louder than the barrage. She knew the final blow wasn't about shouting him down. It was about piercing through the nose, cutting to the marrow of what this fight meant. When her turn came, she stood slowly, her voice calm but carrying the weight of thunder. "Director Patel, you spent weeks calling me reckless, loud, dangerous. Maybe I am loud. Maybe I am reckless with comfort, with power, with the lies that rot this institution. But I am not reckless with the truth, because justice is not partisan. Justice is human." The words rippled across the chamber, sinking into every corner. Patel's face twitched, his lips trembling as though to speak, but nothing came. He slumped back, his eyes cast down, the silence now his only defense, and his final defeat. Cameras caught every frame. Patel's once towering presence collapsing into a shadow of itself, and Jasmine, unbroken, her figure lit beneath the chamber lights like a monument. The moment played live across America, and households from coast to coast leaned forward, transfixed by the sight of power fading in real time. And as the gavel struck to close the session, one question echoed louder than headlines, hashtags, or party lines. In a nation this divided, what does true justice look like? And who will dare to fight for it when the cost cuts deepest? The storm did not end with the gavel. Across America, the debate raged like wildfire. On one channel, pundits painted Jasmine as reckless, a danger to order. On another, she was celebrated as a warrior who had forced truth into the light. In churches, in classrooms, in diners, people argued, not just about Patel, but about what America had become. Families split, communities clashed, the nation trembled on the fault line of its own conscience. And yet, amid the chaos, one thing was undeniable. Jasmine Crockett had transformed into something larger than politics. She was no longer just a congresswoman from Texas, she was a symbol, a living reminder that silence can be broken, that institutions can be challenged, that even one voice, sharp and unyielding, can shake the highest halls of power. Her face appeared on murals in Detroit, on posters in New York, on protest banners in Atlanta. Her words, "You betrayed the badge you wear and justice isn't partisan, it's human," became rallying cries, etched into the collective memory of a nation. Young girls wrote to her, soldiers quoted her, immigrants carried her words into marches. She had given courage a face, and that face was unforgettable. And Jasmine knew the fight was not finished. Power was still entrenched, the system was still bruised, but for the first time in years, the people had a taste of what defiance looked like when wielded with conviction. As the cameras rolled on her final statement of the hearing, she looked directly into the lens, not at Patel, not at Congress, but at America itself. Her voice was steady, cinematic, echoing with a weight that could not be erased. Power can silence voices, but courage makes them echo forever. The screen faded to black, her words hanging like thunder across the nation. And then, one final call, not to the politicians, not to the pundits, but to every viewer watching at home. When justice is on trial, when truth is under siege, will you raise your voice? Or will you stay silent and let power win? The silence that followed was not empty, it was electric. It was a question that demanded an answer. Jasmine's fight shows us a truth many fear to face. Justice is never given freely. It must be demanded, loudly and relentlessly. Her courage reveals that silence protects the powerful, but truth, even when fragile, can topple empires. In every workplace, school, or community, there are moments when it feels safer to stay quiet. But real change is born when ordinary people decide that silence is no longer an option. So here's the question for you. If you stood where Jasmine stood, would you dare to speak, or would you let fear decide for you? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.